What if I told you I've already decided to stop being the hero? Would you still love me if I was the villain? Because I'm tired of being the lesson. I'm tired of being the apology. I'm tired of being the one who understands everyone while no one understands me. Welcome to the shadows. Tonight, we're not talking about love. We're talking about what happens when love turns into power, and power turns into survival. So what if I stopped being nice? What if I stopped explaining myself? What if I stopped softening my edges so you wouldn't feel uncomfortable? Would that make me evil? Or would it just make me honest? Because, let's be real, the world loves you when you're agreeable. The world loves you when you're quiet. The world loves you when you shrink. But the second you grow, the second you set a boundary, the second you say no, suddenly you're the problem. So, tell me, if I refuse to bleed for people anymore, does that make me dangerous? If I stop sacrificing to keep everyone comfortable, does that make me cruel? If I choose myself, does that make me the villain? Because here's the truth nobody will ever say out loud. Villains are just people who stopped tolerating disrespect. Villains are just people who got tired of being the sacrifice. Villains are just people who realized they don't owe anyone their destruction. So what if I'm not turning into something dark? What if I'm just refusing to stay small? What if the villain label is what people give you when you stop giving them access to you? Do you ever notice that in the stories? The villain always has a reason. If it's betrayal, rejection, abandonment, humiliation, no one wakes up and chooses to be misunderstood. It happens slowly, one disappointment at a time, until the person that they used to be dies and something colder takes their place. So what if I stopped dying quietly? What if I stopped forgiving instantly? What if I stopped being the emotional punching bag for people who cannot regulate themselves? Would you still love me? Or do you only love me when I make you feel powerful? Because sometimes the villain isn't the one destroying things. Sometimes the villain is the one who finally walks away and refuses to come back. Let me ask you something real. If I outgrew you, if I evolve past the version of myself that you're comfortable with, would you still stand beside me? Or would you resent me for not staying the same? Because growth can feel like betrayal. to people who have benefited from your silence. Imagine this. I stop apologizing. I stop explaining my boundaries. I stop shrinking my ambition. And I stop lowering my voice. And suddenly, I'm intimidating. But I'm not louder. I'm just no longer available for your manipulation. The villain archetype is often just confidence that refuses to bow, and I'm done bowing. Would you still love me if I stopped being easy to control? Would you still love me if I stopped prioritizing you over myself? Would you still love me if I became emotionally unavailable to the chaos? Because here is the truth. The world calls you cold when you stop setting yourself on fire to keep others warm. Maybe I was never the villain. Maybe I was just the character who realized that the story was written against me, and I decided to rewrite it. So go ahead. Call me intense, call me dramatic, call me difficult, call me the villain. Because I would much rather be the villain in someone else's story than the victim in my own. If loving me requires me to stay small, then that isn't love. If loving me requires me to abandon myself, then that isn't love. If loving me only works when I am agreeable, then that isn't love. That's control. So I'll ask you one last time, not as a threat, not as a performance, but as truth. If I was the villain, would you still love me? Or would you only love me if I stayed easy? Because I'm not asking for blind devotion. I'm asking for love that survives evolution, love that survives boundaries, and love that survives growth, and love that survives truth. I want a love that is real. If this monologue made you feel something, if you've ever been labeled the villain for choosing yourself, if you've ever outgrown a version of you that tried to shrink you, then you've already understood this message. So here's what I want from you to do. Subscribe if you believe growth should never make you the enemy. Comment below, I choose myself. And share this with someone who needs to hear it. And tell me in the comments, would you still love me if I was the villain? Let's talk in the shadows.